heads about that one. But we'll start here locally. Alex Kennedy, the managing editor, BasketballInsiders.com. All right, Alex, here we go. So far, I know that you have been tweeting out that you thought it was going to be a frenzy, a wild free agent period. How would you describe the first 12 hours or so?
Very interesting. I think there's been a lot of contracts that shocked some people. But anytime you have a $94 million salary cap and next year a $107 million salary cap, there's going to be huge contracts. So, Timothy Mozgov, his deal with the Lakers really surprised some people. Some of the point guards that have been signed, DJ Augustin, Jeremy Lin, some of these contracts that have been given out have surprised people. And then some of the asking prices, too. Kent Bazemore asking for $19 million. Evans are asking for $15 million. Those are surprising numbers. But at the end of the day, NBA teams realize that, the salary cap going up, they're going to have to spend this money. So it's been very interesting. And I think it's only going to get crazier, honestly. I think that once the Kevin Durant domino drops and the Al Horford domino falls, we're going to see a lot more deals and spending.
Alex, you just mentioned once the big fish Durant goes, you'll start to see other things kind of follow. Where do you see that Durant? I find it to be fascinating right here that this is all kind of happening with this whole boom of the salary cap. But then again, next year he can make even more money. Next year, if he goes out, a lot of people have suggested he's just talking to these teams to kind of feel the water, tip his toe in the water for next year. Do you think there's still a chance that he leaves Oklahoma City this year?
I think it's possible. I've talked to people that are close with Kevin Durant, and I threw the same topic at them, the same scenario, basically saying it makes so much more sense for him to sign a one-year deal, wait till next summer, then sign the long-term contract because he could make more money and because Russell Westbrook is a free agent next summer. So rather than signing some kind of long-term deal with Oklahoma City, he ties his free agency to Russell Westbrook, and there's not the uncertainty of not playing with Russell there. So I think it makes sense to go back on a one-year deal and then kind of reevaluate things. But the response I got from his camp was kind of surprising. They basically said that Kevin wants to get this over with, that he doesn't want another year of distractions, another year of free agency, that, even though he could make more money and it may make more sense business-wise, he's open to signing a long-term deal this summer. I think right now the front runner is probably the Thunder just because they have a very good team. He's familiar with everyone there, the coaching staff, the teammates. He knows that they can contend, and they've made some nice moves. I like Victor Oladipo going there. The two teams I think that he's interested in meeting with and really intrigued by are the two teams he's meeting with today. The Warriors, who are bringing out everyone from Steph Curry to Klay Thompson to Draymond Green to Steve Kerr to Bob Myers. They're bringing everyone out. He's intrigued by that situation just because there's so many good players there. And he wants to win, and he understands that if he goes there, they're the favorite to win championship after championship. So I think he's intrigued by that situation and how he could fit there. And then the other one that intrigues him is the Clippers. And they're kind of the surprise team because entering this process, people didn't really talk about the Clippers because they didn't have a lot of salary cap space, and it was really unclear how they'd be able to get in the mix for Durant. But, I think he likes the idea of playing with guys like Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan. So he's really curious to see what those two teams have to say. I think as of right now, he likes what the Thunder are doing, but he is intrigued by those teams and wants to hear them out.
All right, there's so much here. First off, if not Oklahoma City, you just mentioned two, if he chooses somebody else, the Clippers, do you think that they are better than Oklahoma City? Like leaving Oklahoma City to go to the Clippers, and even if it is this big four, is that a better team than Oklahoma City has right now?
I don't think so, to be completely honest with you. I think Russell Westbrook has separated himself as one of the best players in the NBA. He still gets criticized a lot for his shot selection and turnovers and things like that, but there's no question that, he's a nightly triple-double threat, and he is just such a nightmare to guard. I think he's a really nice 1-2 punch alongside Durant. And I look at, the supporting cast that Oklahoma City has, Steven Adams, Enes Kanter, some of the players they have there, Victor Oladipo now, who I mentioned. They've done a really good job of not only bringing in guys through the draft and free agency, but developing them and making the most out of them. So I like this team a lot. And then I look at the Clippers team, and, yeah, they have a lot of star power, but they've had trouble winning. They've had trouble taking that next step and being able to, have their individual pieces come together and go deep in the playoffs. They've had some turmoil behind the scenes. Everyone knows that, last year there were the rumors about Chris Paul and DeAndre Jordan not getting along. There was all the Blake Griffin drama this year. I think that he's intrigued by the LA market. That is something that does have to, be considered and be factored into this. But I think right now, putting Durant on that team obviously makes the Clippers very scary. But I think the Thunder with Durant is scarier than the Clippers with Durant.
I agree with that. Alex Kennedy, the managing editor of BasketballInsiders.com. So much to go over here. All right, I want to get your take then on the Pacers getting Al Jefferson, and somehow Al Jefferson's now making significantly less money than Timothy Mozgov. But do you like what the Pacers have done since the week before the draft and now with Jefferson? Are they, to you, as we sit here today, the next best team behind Cleveland?
Well, I think they're up there. I think that they've made a lot of progress. I still have some questions about the moves they've made. Jeff Teague is a very good player. There's no question about it, but he's inconsistent. Thaddeus Young, he's a guy that, is very good, but, again, a guy that disappears some nights, and, he's a good two-way player, but, he's not a star. Al Jefferson at this point in his career is a lot older and has had injuries, and there's a reason that he was only able to get 3 years, $30 million in this market, and it's because he has declined and has had injuries. And Nate McMillan, I still have a lot of questions about Nate as a coach. I think Frank Vogel was by far the better coach there, and I still disagree with their decision to let him go. So there's no question this team's going to look a lot different. Larry Bird has said that they want to run a fast-paced, up-tempo style, and certainly with Jeff Teague, Monte Ellis, Paul George, Thaddeus Young, they're going to be able to do that. Jefferson, I'm not sure how he fits into that. He's not really a guy that can get up and down the floor, so that's kind of strange. It kind of, contradicts their other moves, but this team is going to be different. I think the talent is there on paper. I'm really curious to see how they kind of come together and how Nate coaches this team. But no, there's no question they're going to make a jump in the Eastern Conference. I don't think there's a number 2 team. I think that I would still take a team like Toronto or Boston even. I like those teams a lot. But I think they're definitely, top 5 now. And I think they've solidified themselves as a playoff team. And if they can click and they can, really come together, then this team could be scary. It's just there's a lot of question marks right now, and I'm curious to see how it all works out.
All right, Alex, give me your thoughts on Drummond. He gets $130 million. I'm not saying that he's not an impactful player, but this kind of goes into, I think, the state of the NBA, where we were kind of talking about this before you came on. Al Horford's a very good player. Drummond's a very good player. Whiteside, I don't know if he's on the same level as them, but he's very good. If that guy is your best player, a Drummond, a Horford, a Whiteside, that's not a championship team, right?
Yeah, with today's NBA, it does certainly seem like you're in trouble if that's your best player. Andre Drummond, I think he's the one guy that I would say I would give a max contract to in terms of centers, just because he's 22 years old, so that's kind of scary. What could he become in a few years? His last year, he averaged 16 points, 15 rebounds, and a block and a half. Those are monster numbers for anyone, but for a guy that is 22 years old, it's even more incredible. And I've talked to some of Drummond's teammates who have said that there's times where he just coasts, and he'll coast through a game and still have a double-double and a monster game. So you have to wonder if when that light switch does go off in his head, that light bulb goes off in his head, can Drummond be the kind of guy that is just absolutely dominant and putting up 20 games and blocking a ton of shots? Because he is still young and immature. There's no question about it. And at the end of the day, too, I think the Pistons, there's no way they were going to let him go. With the asset like Drummond, you never want to let him walk away. You want to lock him up on a long-term deal. And worst case scenario, they trade him. But I think they want to make it work with him. They feel like he can be a cornerstone for them going forward. But I do agree with you. In today's NBA, with shooting being valued so much and spacing the floor and being able to knock down free throws and being versatile, being able to guard multiple positions, a guy
right.
like Draymond Green is so valuable. Centers really in today's NBA, it seems like we're kind of going away from that. We're going away from the traditional center who can score with his back to the basket and who can only block shots and play one position. And someone like Drummond, specifically struggles from the free throw line, and that's another issue as well. So I do think that there are some limitations there, but I do think because of his age and his production, he is worth a max contract.
All right, Alex Kennedy's with us. Give me your take, Noah, to the Knicks, coupled with what they did with Rose last week. Your thoughts on what the Knicks are trying to accomplish this offseason, and I guess their name is still kind of in the mix for some other pieces.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge fan. I'll be completely honest with you. They're going to be a better team. They were the third worst team in the Eastern Conference last year. They won 32 games, so there's no question they had to make some moves and try to climb in the standings. I think, what this really is about, in my opinion, is trying to make the playoffs and have a splashy season so that next summer, when that 2017 free agency class becomes available, they can say, okay, look, Kristaps Porzingis is taking the next step. Carmelo Anthony is still here. Joakim Noah had a bounce-back year. These are all best-case scenarios, obviously. But they want to be able to go into 2017 and say, here's our core, here's what we've done, come join us. Because next year's free agency class is ridiculous. That's when you start talking about, Russell Westbrook and Steph Curry and Blake Griffin and all these different guys that are superstar players. And then, potentially a guy like Kevin Durant if he does decide to do a one deal. So I think right now Phil Jackson is trying to assemble a team that can make the playoffs. That's really the goal. I don't think this New York team is a contender. The Derrick Rose move I don't have a problem with because I think it was a low-risk, high-reward move. They didn't really give up too much. He's on a one-year deal. He'll expire after the season, and they can see what they get from him. Joakim Noah, I'm not a huge fan of the contract, but again, today in today's NBA, these contracts are kind of crazy. So if you want to lock up a big man who is effective like that and who's, been a defensive player of the year, you're going to have to overpay for him a bit, especially if you're a lottery team. So I get it. I see what they're doing. They're trying to make that jump into the playoffs. I think they will be a playoff team next year, and I think it will help their pitch next summer. But, they still have moves to make. They're talking to Courtney Lee. I think he'd be a very good piece for them alongside Derrick Rose in the backcourt because he's a two-way player that can defend and he knows his role. They're talking to Eric Gordon. There's a number of guys they're still talking to. So Phil Jackson, I think so far has done a decent job in terms of trying to, help them climb the standings in the Eastern Conference. But their work isn't done.
Alex Kennedy's with us here on the Bash, 97.3 ESPN. All right, let's bring some things close to home here for a few. You tweeted out the Sixers expressing interest in Waiters, Jamal Crawford, Alan Crabb, other guards. You say they've got a ton of money to spend. They went with Jerryd Bayless. It looks like, according to a lot of reports today, 3 years, $27 million. So first, give me your thoughts on that signing, and then what else that they need to, or that they could add, because right now they got Bayless and McConnell as the only 2 points on the team, and I believe Nick Stauskas is the only current shooting guard on the roster.
Yeah, they're looking at a lot of guards right now. They've been talking to a lot of players. Jamal Crawford is one that I put out there. Dion Waiters is another one. They're talking to a lot of guards. They understand that they have big men, obviously, and now with Ish Smith leaving to go to Detroit, they know that they need to bring in guards. Jerryd Bayless, I like his game. I think he could be a contributor for them, someone that can, facilitate and make those guys around him better. He's also a guy that can score the ball when given the opportunity. But it's interesting because I think we've seen with Philadelphia, because they have had so much, so many struggles in recent years, any free agent they're going to bring in, they're going to have to overpay for. Some of those guys that I mentioned they're talking to, they're offering big money to those guys. They're offering pretty significant contracts. And that's what you have to do if you're a team that's lost as many games as they have. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think Bayless on his contract is a pretty fair deal. But when they're talking to guys like Waiters and Crabb and Crawford, they're offering a lot of money. And it's not always a long-term deal. Sometimes they're shorter-term deals. But they're willing to offer significant money and overpay for a guy in order to get veterans in there because they want to make that next step this year. They want to be a team that can, make a jump in the standings and maybe not be a playoff team. I think that's a bit much. But I do think they want to make progress this year. So they're willing to go out and spend money. And they're talking to a lot of veterans right now. But like you said, because they have so few guards in that roster and obviously they have a lot of big men, they're really trying to find point guards and shooting guards right now. And there's going to be a lot of guys they talk to. And don't be surprised if, after this Bayless deal becomes official, they continue talking to other guys and offer some big money as well.
So Barnes, big money. You mentioned big money, guards. Overpay, is that the right guy to overpay for if you're Philadelphia in the spot they're trying to get to, as you just kind of alluded to, trying to get to win more games? So do you overpay and spend that big money on a guy like Harrison Barnes?
I honestly wouldn't. I could see them doing it, but if it were me, I wouldn't do it. I think we saw during the playoffs that, he's a talented player and he's a guy that really fits in with that Warriors system. But at the end of the day, he's someone that isn't the best shooter. He's someone that disappears at times. And I'm not sure that's what you want in a player for the Sixers. You want a guy that can knock down shots and be a reliable option alongside your big men and some of those pieces that are around him. So I think Harrison Barnes, he's going to get a big contract. I just wouldn't want to be the team that gives it to him, to be completely honest with you. He's still young, don't get me wrong. He has potential. He could still grow. But I'm just concerned that he'll have trouble making that transition from, fourth option, fifth option on a historically great team to number one, number two option. And the fact that he's restricted makes it difficult, too. Golden State right now, they're obviously focused on Kevin Durant, Al Horford, and some of these big star players, but they can match any offer. And I've heard that if they can't get Durant or Horford, that they're going to match any offer for Harrison Barnes. So when you make an offer to someone like Barnes, too, you're tying up your money for a few days while you wait for, that team to decide whether or not to match. So I would avoid Harrison Barnes. That's just my opinion. I could see them going after him, and they've been linked to him and Waiters, who are both restricted. So it wouldn't surprise me. But if you're asking me what I would do, I probably would avoid him.
Hey, Alex, this is Billy Schweim. Alex, if Kevin Durant goes back to Oklahoma and either the Sixers exceed expectations and play really well next year, would it be outside the realm of possibility that Kevin Durant would look at a team like the Philadelphia 76ers?
I'd be stunned, honestly. I think it's interesting because they're in the Eastern Conference, and I've always been of the belief that more star players are going to start coming to the Eastern Conference in the next few years because they understand that there's an easy route to the finals. You saw what the Cavaliers did this year where, they really were able to just run through the Eastern Conference and not lose many games and be well-rested. Whereas if you're in the Western Conference, you're playing against, dominant teams. The Warriors had to face so many talented teams on their way to the finals. So I do think that a guy like Kevin Durant or some of these other stars, not just Durant, could look at the Eastern Conference and say, okay, maybe that's the way to go. But Philadelphia, they would have to make a really big jump. And I think not only that, but they'd have to be able to sign another free agent alongside Durant. Durant's not going to go there and go play with the young guys and, take that step back. With LeBron James in Cleveland, he went back there because it was his hometown, and he was willing to make that sacrifice and be patient with the young guys. But, to get someone like Durant to go to a team like, let's say, Philadelphia, they'd have to say, okay, we can go sign Durant, and you can pick your running mate. We can go sign Russell Westbrook as well. We can go sign, another star player for you to play with. And then all of a sudden, that does become interesting because then you have two star players. You have the young core there. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I would say it's a long shot. I think players typically want to go to a team that's already, in contention and one piece away. But look, that's the master plan for Philly. That's the best case scenario. If they can use all this cap room, if their young core develops and really maximizes their potential, and then they have all this cap room and they can go sign, 2-3 free agents, suddenly things become very interesting for Philly, and that team becomes pretty scary.
And with the cap going on $107 million next year, it's not that
well. And
impossible.
now is one of the things that we have kind of gone back and forth on is in NBA free agency, the thought of Philadelphia as a destination in terms of, is Philadelphia a place that NBA players view as a destination that they want to go to? And I've kind of said, look, it's a world-class city. It's great, but I don't think NBA players really are knocking on the door to go to Phil. I can't think of a free agent that's ever come out and said, well, that's where I want to go. In NBA circles, Philadelphia is not at the top of the list of destinations. I could be wrong.
Right now.
In general.
Yeah, right. I would say right now, and I think that can change, though.
With winning, right.
It's a lot about the players that are on the roster. I think in recent years, one thing we've really seen is that markets don't really matter as much. We've seen that with the Lakers and the Knicks, and I've talked to a lot of players who have said, I can get endorsement deals in a small market because of the internet and because of how, things have changed in the NBA landscape. So I think the market isn't really as big of a factor as, anymore. So I think that helps a team like Philadelphia, even though they are a pretty good market. But, you don't have to fight with teams like the Lakers and the Knicks. But look, there's no question that players want to play in situations that give them a chance to win championships. So that's where the Sixers really need Ben Simmons and Jahlil Okafor and Nerlens Noel and those guys to take that next step in order to attract these kind of free agents, because we've seen, guys are willing to go to teams that may be somewhat surprising if the talent's there. Last year Greg Monroe chooses Milwaukee because they have an extremely attractive young core. Now, that didn't work out very well because Monroe didn't really fit great, but, it's one example of a guy that's choosing basketball over everything else. So I do think that Philadelphia could become that kind of destination. It may not be right away. It could be, 2-3 years from now. But if this core develops nicely and with all the cap space they have, certainly with, the fact that they can offer multiple free agents, be in the Eastern Conference, there's a lot to like about that situation. Sure. If you're an NBA, if you're a star player.
Right, and they're a team that needs to start winning to draw people there, whereas I think a New York or L.A., and even that hasn't happened as much, or Miami could say, just come here because we're New York or L.A. or Miami. Philadelphia can't say, just come here because we're Philadelphia.
Right, and I've talked to players about that too. Last year there were a number of guys that were, looking at all their free agency options, and they basically just crossed Philly off the list because they saw, that they hadn't won games, and, they heard about some of the dysfunction behind the scenes. If you look at, like, Kevin Durant, for example, the teams that he's meeting with, they're all winners. When you talk about the Thunder, the Clippers, the Warriors, the Heat, he's meeting with teams that are, one piece away or are, contenders or have won championships in recent years. Players want to go to teams that, are close to contending. They don't want to take a big step back and have to rebuild and be patient and wait. So I think you're right. The next step has to be Philadelphia starts winning games. And I think that's where, it goes back to what the Knicks are doing. They're trying to make the playoffs, even if it means not assembling a contender, but assembling a playoff team. They're trying to make the playoffs so they can say, okay, look, we took that next step. Now you come in and we take, that step toward contending. So I think, it's all a process. You have to be able to bring in players that can allow you to become a playoff team. And then from there, with cap space, with, the right development, that's where you can take that next step and really sell a guy that, they have a chance to contend with you.
All right, Alex Kennedy, the managing editor of BasketballInsiders.com here. By the way, as we're having this conversation, some other things happen. Parsons signs a deal, and our old buddy Evan Turner. Would you ever think you lived in a world, Alex, where Evan Turner got 4 years and $75 million to go to Portland?
That's amazing to me. Entering this process, I had heard that he was looking for, $15 million plus, and I was pretty shocked by that. But, now he gets even more than that. So that just kind of tells you what the NBA salary cap situation is like right now. It's pretty ridiculous.
Chandler Parsons, by the way, max deal with Memphis. So I guess that could help Mike Conley.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's interesting. I think, Chandler Parsons on a max deal, I'm not a big fan of that move either, with his injury history and some of the struggles he had in Dallas. It's interesting to see him get a max deal, but at the end of the day, this is a crazy summer. This is the first of many moves that are going to shock us.
I'll tell you, it has been wild. And it's funny because this whole thing gets even bigger next year, right? The money goes up again next year. So this year and next year, it's going to be ridiculous.
Yeah, next year you're going to have a $107 million cap, and that's a low projection. This year it was a $92 million projection and ended up being 94. So we could see a $109 million cap next year. So that's why these teams are doing this. Let's put that in perspective too. That's why some of these teams are going out and making these kind of signings because 1 year from now, Evan Turner making $18 million per year, as crazy as it sounds, could look like a bargain. It sounds ridiculous, but
he never sounds like a bargain.
Yeah, right. But no, the cap's just going to keep going up, and that's the beautiful thing about signing a new national TV deal if you're the NBA.
All right. Well, a lot of signings going on. The NBA free agent period is open for business. BasketballInsiders.com for more. Alex Kennedy here on the Bash 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, Alex. Enjoy the weekend.
Thanks a lot. Take care.